Um,
All
Randy
right, there
Cole,
you go. Thank you. Thank you.
Randy Coleman begins serving as the CEO of the Columbia Housing Authority May 3rd, 2021. In this role, Randy oversees the strategic direction of the CHA, including a $16 million annual budget, daily operations, and 86 staff who are dedicated to housing 2,000 of Columbia's most vulnerable households. In his previous role, Randy served as housing programs manager for the city of Columbia, where he administered city funding and programs for affordable housing and community development efforts. In his role at the city, Randy spearheaded the implementation of the Columbia Community Land Trust Organization to expand permanently affordable home ownership opportunities. He also oversaw the COVID response planning efforts in partnership with the county and other local partners, including facilitating the investment of $1.5 million in assistance to local minority and women-owned businesses that were unable to obtain PPE funding or other federal assistance. Randy graduated from MU with his master's in public administration. He lives in Columbia with his wife, son, and 2 foster children. Randy, we're very glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here. I was really excited for the invite, and looks like you got a great group, and I'm excited to talk today. Before I get going, could I clarify how much time allotted we have?
You have until 1:15 to make your
Okay.
presentation and answer members' questions.
Very good. So I got a lot of time. That's good. Well, I came prepared. I have about 30 slides or so. I'll start by sharing my screen.
I have to make you host to do
Okay.
that.
Very
Okay.
good.
And
Very good.
some people may come in late. If you see them, go ahead and admit them.
I'll do that. I'll do that.
Okay, Randy, you are host now.
All right. Let's see. So can you all see my screen?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
hopefully it's my presentation. I got 2 screens, but just to make sure. Very good. All right, so I'll get started. What I was going to talk about today, just an overview of the Columbia Housing Authority, kind of who we are, how we're governed, how we're structured, kind of the direction we're headed, and some additional details. I was also going to talk about homelessness and housing and security needs. That seems to be a very hot topic, not only in our community, but in communities across the country. So I thought I'd take a little deeper dive into that. I was also privileged enough to take a trip last week with the Columbia Chamber of Commerce and a group of about 60 local citizens and leaders from across different sectors, and everyone from small business leaders to bankers to a county commissioner. We had our deputy city manager was there, nonprofit leaders, a really good group. And a big part of that visit was visiting their housing authority there in Athens. And it was a really, they're doing a lot of innovative work. And it was really exciting to visit with them. It seems like they had a lot of elements of a strategic direction and vision for their housing authority that I think could apply really well here. And then I also want to talk through, a big part of our strategic direction is how we fit into helping solve the affordable housing and homelessness and housing insecurity needs in our community. So I thought I'd summarize kind of what we see as our biggest thing on the horizon in that regard, and our biggest efforts coming up. So hopefully those are good topics to cover. And I can go a lot of different directions. Feel free to interrupt, or we can take questions at the end. I think I can get through this in probably about 30 minutes. So an overview of the Columbia Housing Authority, it was established by city ordinance. So the city created back in 1956, much like communities all across the country. We're able to create these entities to get additional resources into their community from the Department of Housing and Urban Development to house our vulnerable populations in our community. Public housing authorities, I think a key point that I'm really trying to emphasize with people in our community, and is one that was emphasized in our visit to Athens, and something that I'd been thinking before I went, but really got crystallized when I went to Athens, is that public housing authorities have very distinct powers that are really tools and resources for our community. You know, they're not just for the housing authority. We're a community resource, and because of how we're governed, how we're formed under state law, how we're funded, we are uniquely qualified to really leverage a lot of efforts for affordable housing. So the state law identifies us as a municipal entity. So some of the key things that allows for is issuing tax exempt bonds. So that gives us a lot of financing and leveraging power for any investments in affordable housing that we get that we can leverage further, which means we're an entity that has a much higher capacity to do a scalable effort of investing in affordable housing, much like housing authorities across the country. We also receive annual regular funding from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which means we have a robust staff of about 86 people that do everything from maintaining properties to helping us develop new properties, to a safety department, to maintenance department. We also have a services department that connects our residents to local service providers and provides some of the services ourselves. So we go beyond just housing people. So we try to really wrap our arms around them and help them improve in their lives. Since we're a public housing authority, we also steward our city and county allotments of vouchers, or housing vouchers, so Section 8 vouchers. Which means we oversee how those vouchers are applied to properties on the private market when people come to apply for funds. And it also gives us the ability to attach those vouchers to properties to use as a financing mechanism to where there's an investment in affordable housing. It's got an ongoing financing mechanism over time to sustain that property. So a lot of capacity and a lot of resources to help with affordable housing. We have a 5-member board of commissioners. They are appointed by the mayor. We've got a really strong board and very diverse set of skill sets. We've got Bob Hutton, a former council person that is our chairperson. That's a very long tenured and very experienced board member. Robin Winokur is on the Water and Light Advisory Board and also the MU Board of Curators. And Steve Calloway, very active in the local Men's Minority Network and many groups. And Rigel Oliveri, who's really a national expert on fair housing, travels the country speaking on a lot of the issues that we hold near and dear to our heart here at the Public Housing Authority. And then we've got Jay Moran, who is a resident commissioner. She has a lived experience of being homeless, experiencing what it's like to be housing insecure. So she really brings a unique and strong perspective when we're discussing these things and what it means, what our work means to people's lives and why it's important. So I made a little diagram. A lot of people ask what's the relationship between the city and the Columbia Housing Authority. We are a separate entity, but we do have a close relationship, and there's been a long history of a lot of support from the city, both when I worked with the city and before that. The mayor, as I noted, appoints the board. They're created by city ordinance. The Columbia Housing Authority, we also serve in a capacity where the city is required, and when they receive CDBG and home funds each year, to consult us on our public housing needs, because we both report to the same funding source, and we're supposed to align our planning efforts and investments. And I had a lot of good collaboration with my predecessor, who was in the position I'm in now, and that seems to be continuing as I stepped into this role. And the Columbia Housing Authority and its relationship with the city, of course, we go and access federal funds to house our most vulnerable populations and make sure they're taken care of. and that our properties are well maintained on behalf of our community and safe, and that we're providing resources and services to the people we serve. And we also access grants and at times debt to create affordable housing. And we facilitate our Section 8 payments to private landlords here within the city, but then I also included the county over there. We took over the county vouchers many years ago when the entity that was overseeing those had some struggles. So we actually serve out into the county on that program. And then of course, we also inform the city on CHA resident needs and try to connect our residents to those processes. You know, when I was being introduced, it mentioned a $16 million budget. You know, that's a sizable allotment for a nonprofit entity to have a good impact on the community. It is a bit deceiving in some way because about 11 million of that is pass-through dollars that really comes through us and goes as direct payments to landlords on the private market through our Section 8 program. So certainly a lot of work to do to make sure people are income qualified, that the property is qualified, that we've got the property manager's banking account. So a lot of work there, but a big portion of our budget is that piece, which means we have about 3.5 to 4 million per year that we have for stewarding about $63 million in assets each year. And I think I just let Commissioner Thompson in. So I'll move to the next slide. The strategic direction for CHA. So I'm really excited about our direction here at the Columbia Housing Authority, and I've really been able to step into the role and hit the ground running. We've got a great staff, very experienced staff and very dedicated. I have implemented a few changes that are unique to my leadership style and things that I want to see as an organizational culture. One thing we did very early on was we created a new mission, vision, and values that's on our website. I wasn't going to read it all off to you today, but I think pieces that are really important to me is in our vision for the Columbia Housing Authority. I have our vision, a big piece of that is being our community's leading housing provider. We have those extra tools and resources that others may not have. So I really want to lean into that. Another thing I observed when I stepped in is we really needed to add a value. So we added diversity, equity, inclusion as a value. And we've incorporated some of that language into how we approach safety, how we approach services to our residents. What I found is we have a lot of staff that value, that hold those values. But I felt formalizing it takes it a step further and helps set us up for some ongoing policy implementations that can operationalize those values. We also had a change on our wait list. Homelessness and housing insecurity is really at the forefront. I found when I stepped into my role, we had a provision in our wait list that kind of penalized people that were unemployed. So it moved people up our wait list faster if they were employed, but really on more modern approaches to housing and homelessness. Housing first approach is looked at as a best practice because when we think about people bettering their lives in terms of mental health or substance abuse or even workforce development and education, you really can't pay attention to any of those things until you have your housing. Housing's that first thing that provides that stability in people's lives. So I wanted to implement that value into our wait list. So we got rid of that barrier. So now people that are unemployed and homeless can move up our wait list just as quickly as others. So I think that was a good change. Also, we want to do a significant amount of redevelopment on our last 120 units of public housing, some of which are down on Park Avenue and near our admin building. But one thing that's very important to me is community engagement. I also want to make sure we have the right development team in place. So I made some changes with who our developer was, and we just finalized agreement with them actually yesterday. And I'm really excited about the new developer, and we'll make some announcements on that next week. But as a part of that process, we involved the community in reviewing and scoring those developers. And so the developer we've chosen had a lot of input from local community members as well as a CHA resident, which I'm really excited about. Also, another change we have that's exciting is we've had a resident advisory board in place for many years, but it's been the practice that staff chaired and ran those meetings. But I've made a change, and we now have a formalized structure of a president, vice president, and treasurer that are all CHA residents. So we've identified some leaders. So our residents are truly going to take ownership of that board, and I'm going to go there as a liaison and a service to those folks. So those meetings look a lot different, and we're really empowering some voices. Also, we've had some discussions with the Columbia Community Land Trust very early on, many more discussions that need to be had. But I'm excited about the potential there of helping bring that initiative over to help transform CHA, as well as expand the capacity and portfolio of the Columbia Community Land Trust, but more discussions to be had there. And then, preserving and expanding our housing stock is the thing we're most laser focused on here at the Columbia Housing Authority. So I thought it'd be good to talk through kind of the history of the development of our units at the Columbia Housing Authority, because I think it tells a really interesting story. All of these numbers were provided to me by our longest tenured staff, Greg Willingham, who's our head of maintenance. But right now, we have about or exactly 753 units of affordable housing in our own portfolio. And most of that public housing stock was built by 1974, about 719 units. And you can see, started with Stewart Parker or the Lincoln and Unity sites, and moved on down to Bear Creek by 1974. We really haven't had much additions to our portfolio until the Mid-Missouri Veterans Housing, the project Patriot Place in conjunction with Welcome Home, 25 units, and a couple of additional units here and there. So I started looking at, what's been the population growth in our community since, public housing. This isn't a perfect slide. I've got two different axes at different points, but I think even if I had these numbers listed, it would be a really powerful image. Back in 1974, we had 719 affordable housing units in our portfolio with a population of 62,000. Our population has doubled, but we really only gained about 35 units. So really, it really speaks to the need, at least with our piece of the affordable housing puzzle, to expand our housing stock to meet the need. I was going to switch gears here and talk a little bit about defining homelessness. That's been a big topic of discussion and something that's really important to me and my staff. I thought it'd be good to talk through the different types of homelessness. Much of the discussion that we've been having as a community, as of late, seems to really been focused on the literally homeless or chronically homeless that are very visible on street corners and other locations, which I think is a very positive thing, because those voices need empowered, and we need to make sure those individuals don't die of exposure during really cold weather. But I also want to talk about other categories of homelessness, because I think sometimes this portion is often forgotten or overlooked because they're not in front of our face, and really this is the biggest portion of that population that's been most impacted by the pandemic. So under federal law, there's definitions of people that are at imminent risk of homelessness. So people that are on the verge of eviction or may have gotten a notice and are seeking other housing. There's homeless under other federal statutes, and the statute that's noted within the American Rescue Plan Act includes the McKinney-Vento Act, which provides for the people that are doubled up with family members or friends, living out of a hotel, living in transitional housing, living in a non-permanent location that's not really an ideal living situation. That's the same definition that our public schools use, because those people are in fact still classified as homeless. And then those individuals fleeing and attempting to flee domestic violence. So in the ARPA Act, I mentioned it uses the McKinney-Vento Act, and then it also includes those at risk of homelessness. And this was intentional to help those families that were already on the fringes, that had to make tough choices about staying home while their children were doing virtual learning and not having a type of job where you had that flexibility to stay at home. Many people working service jobs that lost their employment. So those people on the fringes that were really impacted by the pandemic. You know, I mentioned ARPA used the definition of homeless under the McKinney-Vento Act, that broader version. The at-risk definition within the federal guidelines includes households that are less than 30% the area median income. So that means a household of two, people making less than 18,000 gross annual income. So it includes those that are 30% or less AMI and that have either moved 2 or more times in the last 60 days, doubled up with family member or friends, living in a hotel or transitional housing, or exiting a public funded institution. We don't really have a count on these individuals in our community because they're a lot more hidden and not that visible. We do have a handle on some of those people numbers wise, and I'm going to talk through a couple of those. One metric that the American Community Survey does track is renter households that are 30% or less or below AMI that are also housing cost burden greater than 50%. So, those homeless populations are contained within that group. And we know there's about 5,845 of those households. And we also know that nationwide, most public housing authorities serve about 25% of the households that qualify with either public housing or Section 8, just because that's the level of resources there that can meet that need. So if we think about the Columbia Housing Authority, we serve about 2,000 households. So that reflects that 1 in 4 households pretty well, as most of the households we serve are below 30% the area median income. Right now, we have about 900 households on our wait list, and about 90 to 95% of those households meet that at-risk or homeless definition. Many are doubled up with family members or friends, maybe living at Welcome Inn on the business loop, or some kind of less ideal housing situation. We've been working with the Columbia Public Schools and are going to hold an event soon to help connect our vouchers to students, families that are homeless. Right now, there's about 167 children that CPS has identified that are homeless. Again, they're going to school, their parents are working, but they're doubled up with family members or friends or living in a hotel or less ideal situation. So definitely a need out there. This is not a perfect chart, but I put all these numbers kind of together in one pie, thinking, what are all the different populations? And there's more work that needs to be done on refining these numbers. But that 30% or below AMI that I mentioned, 5,845 households that are also housing cost burden greater than 50%. That's a big pie. And if you look at within that, 900 of those folks are on our wait list. And looking back at our point in time counts of how many chronically or literally homeless individuals are unsheltered, in 2020, that was 49. And that number seemed to hold pretty steady each year. I do think, just visibly, I think that number will be higher next year when they do the point in time count, because one was not done in 2021. So it'll be interesting to see what that unsheltered count is in 2022. And it'll probably be concerning. In terms of strategies and how we address affordable housing and making it available, one way that we do it, we do it 2 ways. We provide rental assistance and utility assistance, supportive services to families and resources to help get them be able to house themselves or stay housed. There's many resources that do that. Much of what's been funneled into our community through the CARES Act and other measures has been, the utility assistance, the CARES Act funds, Como helps, council reserves. We've had a lot of money go towards rent assistance and those things to help give people tools and resources to stay housed or get housed. And those have been great investments over the last year or two. A challenge we've been seeing and other service providers, and you hear this from other folks in the housing arena, such as Brian Toohey at the Columbia Board of Realtors, is we have a real lack of housing availability. Luckily we're in the same boat as many communities across the country, so this is pretty common throughout the country, just because the construction of affordable housing has not kept up pace with growth, and wages have not kept up with the cost of housing. And there's been a labor shortage since the 2000s for building housing. There's been increased regulatory costs, so the housing stock has not kept up with the demand. a couple weeks ago, Jane Williams and I had talked quite a bit over at Love Columbia, and we've been comparing, properties that we can find available. Just the other week, there was 36 properties available for rent under $1,000. But I know right now we have 82 households searching that have been issued a voucher, and many folks are struggling to match that voucher to a property. Right now, we have 150 vouchers available through Section 8, some of the tenant-based rental assistance funding provided from the city, some additional emergency vouchers provided to us from HUD through some of the stimulus funds. But our participants literally can't connect that voucher to an available property on our market because our housing supply is so low. Also, this has caused rent prices to increase. So they've went up about 10% within the last year. And a lot of our residents that we serve or potential residents are experiencing rent prices being bid up a lot like what's going on in the for sale market. We've had some tenants even try to scrounge together money to pay on top of what they're required to pay, and then our assistance, but to meet that bid up in rent prices. So it really speaks to the lack of affordable housing. So another way that we expand and provide affordable housing in our community is we actually invest in affordable housing and creating new units and preserving old units to make sure we don't lose them. We've done some of that as a community each year through our annual home funding allotments, as well as accessing funds at the state through the low-income housing tax credit. This year we have the home ARC funds. This is a one-time shot of funds that we have not seen in the home program this large. So I'm feel very positive about trying to apply for some of those funds for our properties. So I thought it'd be good to think through, what's the difference between investing in rent assistance versus, actually building affordable housing. And I thought in particular, hey, it'd be good to think about that 2.1 million in home ARP funding that's available. So I know in our programs, how they operate, if you compare the two, if you invest all the 2.1 million in rent assistance, it would serve about 146 households over a 2-year period. And I know if we built, additional units out of that 2.1 million, it would serve about 600 households. And thinking through rent assistance, the average assistance payment per month in our program is about $600 per month. The average tenure of folks before they, move on and up into market rate units or move to another housing situation or town is about 2 years. So if you kept those equals, I would think that 2.1 million could be spread across 60 units at 35,000 a unit, and that we could leverage additional funding from MHDC or the Federal Home Loan Bank, as well as some of our own financing mechanisms. And I think it's very reasonable to expect those properties to last at least 20 years. So I think that's a pretty conservative number of 600 households. Even if we up that 10-year to 4 years, and we said people really like those houses because they're nice and they're going to stay there longer, that's still at 300. So there's still a much higher impact when we create a community asset that's there if things were all equal. But the more impactful piece of this is things aren't equal, and we're even struggling to get people issued rent assistance vouchers to available households. So I'll talk a little bit about our redevelopment and expansion proposal. We had proposed 4.2 million to the city, and we'll likely approach the county as well. And then of course we'd seek other funding sources like the low-income housing tax credit at the state and the Federal Home Loan Bank. But we want to renovate and convert our remaining 120 units of public housing. So convert is an important word because as we renovate these units, we'll convert them to non-public housing. The end user will not experience any kind of change in affordability. They'll be just as affordable. The change will be that they'll be nicer, much more livable, and like a market rate unit and up to modern living standards. But by converting them, that means that we'll have a better financial model because we'll be able to access low-income housing tax credit funding, which you can't under public housing. And these properties will have a better financial model over time. That also means that they'll be tax dollars, because public housing, we do not pay property taxes on, but for when we convert them to non-public housing, we provide and pay for add to the tax base. We also want to expand our housing stock by 49 units. We'll include 24 units for literally homeless, and include 25 units for permanently affordable home ownership is our vision, hopefully in partnership with the Columbia Community Land Trust. We would also partner in our Section 8 homeownership assistance program, which allows us to convert Section 8 payments rather than to landlords to actual mortgages, and include our family self-sufficiency program that provides extra supports to families. So we've done some renovations on 597 units, and again, we have 120 more to go. But these are some of the units on Bryant Walkway, before and after. You can see they look much nicer after we renovate them on the outside. This is some additional units. And this is the inside. This is what they looked like before renovation. So this is when they were public housing. So you can see older gas stoves that don't have any kind of bath fan or exhaust fan. The older flooring, metal frame windows. Many of these units don't have insulation, so they're not as energy efficient. This is after they've been renovated. So, new modern open floor plans with builder grade finishes, nice fixtures, vinyl windows, energy efficient, much nicer places to live. So this looks and feels and acts more like a market rate unit, and it's a much better place for folks to live. So I mentioned I want to talk a little bit about the trip to Athens that I took with the folks from our community through the Chamber's trip to Athens. And it was a really great trip where I could connect with a lot of different people here locally from different sectors. But the Athens Housing Authority was doing some really innovative work. And I think the thing that struck me the most was some of those images that we might think of or have in our mind about what public housing is, our images from the history or past. They really made an effort to do away with those images. They transformed their properties to make them look, feel, and act like market rate units. They added amenities like a movie theater for families to rent out, a community room, a really high grade fitness center. It was really a really nice place, but they still served those very low income populations. So the view of their housing authority was a cutting edge, innovative community partner that was a community resource that provided affordable housing that anyone would want to live in. So this is what their housing authority units used to look like in their downtown area. It kind of looked and reminded me of some of our units on Park Avenue. This is before they did their renovations. So they did a community planning process where they brought in an architect and artist to do a design charrette and involved community stakeholders from a broad cross section of their community. And they painted a picture based on that input of what it should look like. And they really delivered in a manner that honored the public input. This is what it looked like nearing the end of construction. So yeah, really neat place with a lot of different design features. On the inside, I mentioned they had a movie theater you could rent out for families. They had a computer lab room, a fitness center. It was just a really nice high-end place. This is kind of what their financial model looked like. $15 million, a variety of sources, everything from tax credits to home funds. They also had a local tax that went into it, a special use tax. And then their housing authority, of course, brought $2 million to the table. We would do something similar to that here in our community because it's important that we invest in it as well. Another innovative approach that they were taking that I thought really matched with what I would hope for our vision would be here in Columbia is they had a homeownership assistance program where they did infill development on infill lots and worked with local nonprofit partners, including their community land trust there in Athens, Georgia. But because they're a public housing authority, they could issue a bond. So they issued 10 million in tax exempt bonds for mortgages to provide below market rate mortgages to some of their residents that had rented for a while but were ready to move up into home ownership. That seemed like a really innovative project and approach. They've served 128 first-time home buyers. Is a really neat approach that I thought would be applicable here. And some of their homes remind me a little bit of some of the development we've done here on, say, Lynn Street and over on North 8th with the Coolmore Cottages. It's just some of the houses that they've built. I got 2 slides left, and then I can take some questions. So I want to talk through the impact of our request for 4.2 million, or the 120 units we want to renovate and the additional 49 we want to build. It'll have a really deep impact on inequities in our low-income minority populations. About 62% of the households we serve are minority populations here at the Columbia Housing Authority, and about 80% of our populations are below that 30% below the area median income. So, we're at a point, it feels like, at a policy moment where communities across the country want to really invest in righting some of those inequities and investing in more equitable and inclusive communities. Investing in people's housing and where they live seems like a really big statement towards social equity and improving their lives. It would directly impact families and children adversely impacted by the pandemic. I think our project, if we did 169 units, would impact 1,000 individuals over 10 years. And I think it would leverage, over $20 million in private investment in our community, create 100 jobs, and we could make sure we're committed to involving local firms and minority and women-owned businesses. I think it would collectively, if we finished renovating all of our units and converting them collectively, would impact our tax base by $2 million over 10 years. And it would achieve significant outcomes in all the plans that in my old role and people before me have been working on for well over 10 years. Oftentimes you hear people talk about plans being left on shelves, and I think many of our community leaders care about those plans. The problem has been we haven't had resources to invest in a lot of these things, and now we're at a moment where we can actually put those plans to use. Some of the further impact and background around the housing authority. We were created by the city of Columbia to house our most vulnerable populations. So I really want to make the Columbia Housing Authority, our community's resource. I'm the CEO, but it's not my housing authority. It's the community's housing authority. And that's something that a culture that I'm putting throughout my staff. And we want to be a good partner to the community. I think this would be a great opportunity to expand our housing stock and catch up with some of the population growth and need. And we've got a lot of expertise in our outfit, and we've got staffing that has been through a lot of this work and expertise, and we have land procured and ready to go. And any investment within our organization would all go towards the capital improvements and population served. We don't need to hire additional finance or administrative staff. And I think the project has real potential to transform how CHA meets the needs of our residents and our community at large. And I think it'd be a great opportunity to expand the capacity and portfolio of the Columbia Community Land Trust as well. So that's all of my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Well, thank you, Randy. I really appreciate that. We've got a good deal of time, about 20 minutes or so for questions. And if the folks out there would get on the reactions box and put their hand up or wave frantically, we could probably recognize some of those questions that you will be able to answer.
And if Randy could make me host again, I would appreciate it.
Sure.
Pam, and then stop sharing, and then we'll see everybody's face again.
All right. And how do I make you host again? I'm sorry. I
Well,
apologize, Pam.
Well, go to participants and
Okay,
then go to my name. It's the very top one, I think.
all right, I got it.
And then go to the right and it should say, make me host.
Got it. All right, thank you so much.
My, my question is, was it Athens, Georgia, where you went?
Yes, ma'am. It was Athens, Georgia.
Okay, I missed that one. You undoubtedly said it, but I apparently missed it.
Yeah.
And I wanted to also ask, I heard, I think Wednesday evening, a presentation by the Reverend Bryant about the Opportunity Center, Opportunity Campus that's being looked at to address homelessness. I wondered if you could say a little bit more about how you're involved with, how you and the Columbia Housing Authority are involved with that.
Sure, yeah. So when I worked at the city, I was involved at the policy level to help include public input and needs and plans for that facility within the 5-year consolidated plan, as well as the council policy funding resolution that was eventually approved by city council. So I worked with that group extensively when I worked with the city. We had some planning meetings there at Turning Point or Wilkes Boulevard United Methodist Church, where me and my staff helped include 18 homeless individuals be at that meeting and provided the transportation. So been involved with the issue for quite some time, and it's an important issue. Since I've been over here in my new role, I've met with Ed Stansbury, the new leader of VAC. I don't know, at least half a dozen or more times to talk through, how do our projects fit together. He also stepped into a new role, and so I've been, trying to help him where I can on, connecting to processes, funding, things of that sort. Also connected to the person they hired to assist him, Katie Wilkins, who I've known for a long time, has been helpful to my outfit as well. So I guess in short, we're in constant communication, talking through how do we lift each other's projects up. Because certainly, there's a continuum of needs for homeless populations in our community. Some people are at a point where they can't mentally choose to move into housing, or just can't pull the necessary documentation to get into housing. So, there is some of that need for lower barrier shelter. But certainly the shelter is not the end solution for people that they serve. So they try to help stabilize them and get them into a place where they can get into our housing. So we work closely with them, as well as all of our local service providers. Every 2 weeks, we meet with the Functional Zero Task Force, letting them know how many vouchers we have, who we need help tracking down, working through our by name list as a community, seeing how we can get people, into housing. So housing's the answer to homelessness in the end, but certainly there's a continuum of needs and services that we got to provide to help people along the way. So that's a long answer, but short. I talk to them quite often. I have been a little more focused on my own position and learning my role and setting our own strategic direction, but I do the best I can to maintain contact.
Thank you. Carl, you had your hand up, Carl or Maury.
Yeah, I just a couple of quick questions. First of all, I think it sounds like the board that you have for CHA is pretty distinguished. It sounds like a wonderful group of people. Just generally, how's your perspective changed, or have they, between your city role and the role that you have with CHA? And the other additional question is about you've mentioned something about this, but some of the ideas about the partnership with the Community Land Trust and the interaction with the CHA.
Sure. So I'll take the first one, how my perspective has changed since I've come into this role. I definitely felt in my old role, I had 4 staff members. So we were a great team, very closely knit. We could almost read each other's minds. We'd worked together so long. And then coming on board to an 86 person operation with different departments, that's been, that was a definite change. You feel a lot more personnel things that you need to address. I can't be as hands-on in every project, that I was in the past. So that's been a challenge at first, but also it's been a bit of a blessing too, because you start realizing how much you can depend on other staff members to take things on, and then I've started really realizing the capacity of the organization and learning the power that's there to really help a lot of people. So I'd say another perspective that's changed, one has been, how I view council members. And I feel that that's kind of changing as I go here. In a staff role, how you view council members is very different after you step out and you're in a different organization. I know you're all people that, enjoy your lives and the community and do that, but the role is different. So that's been a little bit of a change as well. Another perspective that's changed for me is just the need for housing in our community. I knew it at the policy level at the city, but now seeing, people come in my door every day looking for housing, living in really, really bad situations. I think that just got really amplified and more personal. Sorry, I got another perspective that changed too. I don't think it ever sunk into me when I was at the city level of how big of impact the housing authority has on homeless and housing insecure populations. I mean, a lot of these people that are kind of hidden, that you don't know about, that are homeless, are really seeking for a place to live, a home, not so much a transitional site or shelter. So I think that really struck me as I stepped into my role here of the capacity to help those types of folks. The second one, the Community Land Trust, we're still in a place where those discussions have still been very preliminary. I'm extremely jazzed about the idea because, I was kind of baptized in the water of the Community Land Trust, at the city. I was all for that initiative, and I still am wherever it ends up. But I just think that initiative could be tremendously leveraged, and the capacity could be tremendously grown if aligned with our operations here, just because we have so many resources. We've got land, we've got myself that started the thing. The land trust is a very complex model that, the ground level work is not as sexy as, maybe cutting the ribbon on the house at the end of the day. So I think if it came over here, we could hit the ground running with it. But I need to get my board over here at the Housing Authority comfortable with that, as well as the board of the Columbia Community Land Trust comfortable with that. We have to talk through the implications of decisions around that. What are the implications for organizational missions, bylaws, board structures, things like that. So that's not to be taken lightly. I feel like I can see a path to get there, but there's a lot of people involved in that process. So it's going to take some real work. That's not going to happen overnight, but I'm definitely excited and motivated if there's some potential there.
I think Pam is next, and then Herb, and then Ian.
I have two questions, but I'm going to do one and then let it pass on to other people. What is happening with Room at the Inn this year?
I'm not aware yet of what is happening with the Room at the Inn. I know they're still seeking a location. I know that the VFW building on the business loop was floated as an idea. I don't think that came to fruition. I think Debbie Graham could probably give you a more up-to-date answer. I know things are pretty dynamic, but I think they are still searching.
Okay. Herb, go ahead.
I'd like to defer to Ian Thomas, who is known to ask easy, quick to answer questions, and I will follow him.
Fair enough. Thanks, Herb. Thanks for the presentation, Randy, and for all of your work on housing. You showed a slide which listed a lot of different funding components for, I think, for affordable housing in general in Athens, Georgia. And I just wondered, it went by a little quickly, but I just wondered, you don't need to show it again, but if there were some types of funding sources that they tap in Athens that we're kind of missing out on here, and an opportunity to sort of develop a new funding stream for affordable housing.
Sure, yeah. So they had a couple streams that we don't have here. They had a special use tax. Now those funds went to a variety of things in their community. And I think it's important to note that their governance is quite a bit different than ours. So their whole tax structure might be a little different than ours. They are a unified city county government. So that really, we're definitely not comparing apples to oranges. But that special use tax fund could go towards capital infrastructure projects like roads for economic development, sewer infrastructure, more of those traditional infrastructure type items. But they utilized it for land and infrastructure for their affordable housing development. So it had to be publicly owned infrastructure, which is very similar here in our community, how we utilize some of our CDBG funds, because the CDBG cannot go towards the construction of affordable housing. But when I was in my old role, we used it for a lot of the infrastructure that was public on the front end. But yeah, it was a special use tax. I think it was 1% on sales, I think, if I'm not right. But anyways, that was one funding source. And they also had a housing trust fund with local dollars that went into it, that was kind of revolving, that went into the project.
And if I may follow up, are there examples around the country of property taxes being used to build and service affordable housing?
Yeah, I've heard that there are. I don't have any off the top of my head, but my answer to that would be yes.
Great, thank you.
Adjourn. Thank you also. I really appreciate your talking to us, and I appreciate what you're doing with the Housing Authority. I wonder if you'd tell us what you are doing in relationship to a problem that frequently arises in communities that are structurally like ours. Ithaca, New York comes to mind, which has a college and university and a smaller population, but a similar mix of a very large number of small renters, into parties who rent comparatively inexpensive housing and have one or a few units that they do. And what the cooperation between those and the housing authority, public housing, it can get complicated. What are you doing to get good relations there and keep that smooth?
Yeah, so when I came on board, we hired a new position and have done a little restructuring. We hired a housing ambassador. It's partially funded by the city. City council's put a lot of good investments in affordable housing here, and it's one that can leverage our efforts. So our housing ambassador has been meeting with the Columbia Apartment Association on a regular basis, has been informally reaching out to some of the types of landlords that you talked about, trying to get them interested in being in our programs. And then he's also available to act almost like a realtor, but or someone helping our residents search down properties. And I also did a couple of position changes and hired an IT person. And so they've been working in tandem to get our website up to date more. We've got a lot of work to do there, but we've implemented a text messaging software where residents or people that sign up for our housing can get on it, and landlords can put their properties on it. So when available properties come up, we blast out text messages every Friday. Some people think that low-income populations don't have access to internet or cell phones, but we don't find that to be the case. Many do. Sometimes the service is spotty, or you might have 3 or 4 different phones or a friend's phone to get connected to. But we've got 80 people signed up for that. And so we're trying to think of all the innovative ways that we can eke as much out of the market as we can.
Great.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Pam, you had another question?
I do, and this may be an unfair question. It may not be under you at all. But I thought since you were here, I would ask you anyway. I have a new friend who is a nursing student. She's currently in an apartment which will not be available to her come March. She would like to find out about a rent to own place. And her bank is Bank of America. She says her bank won't help her. So where do I send her?
I would look at a local community bank. When I worked at the city, I oversaw the homeownership assistance program. Some of our big national providers were okay to work with, like US Bank and others, but really our local community banks work really well. I don't want to provide favoritism to them, so I'll try to list most of them. But First Mid, Central Bank, Commerce Bank, Landmark Bank, even Flat Branch Mortgage, that's not a bank. All those local people here and firms really know our programs well, and I've found are good to work with.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that information, and I will pass it on.
And when I say our programs, I meant the city's programs. I'm still
Sure.
struggling to detach myself from the city. I guess once a city guy, always a city guy.
Wiley, I believe
That's
you're
what I
next.
hear, Randy.
Yes, I do have my hand up. First, thank you, Mr. Cole, for I join others in thanking you for your service and for your presentation here today. It is my understanding that in our community, we do have children who are literally, and fit into your literal category of homelessness. What, if anything, can the Housing Authority do to address the problem of those children?
Yeah, glad you brought that up. I was on a call earlier today with some service providers. We were talking about that very issue. We have seen a rise in the literally homeless of youth, and there's some discussion around what youth means. But I think we can all agree on what youth means in general terms. It's all about relationships, right? One provider in town, Flourish, is overseen by Mark Kirchhoff or Kirchhoff. He's really passionate about youth homelessness. So we've struck up a conversation about what we can do more. And there's one really good access point that I think we can expand at the Housing Authority. Through the Department of Social Services, there's a voucher that we can access on top of our Section 8 vouchers, specifically for youth. So we're looking at how we can expand into that resource as we can. Again, it is going to fall back towards housing stock though as well. I feel like accessing additional vouchers is good on one hand, but we're really struggling to match people with properties. So one thing that I've been considering is, in some of our new development, could we mix in a greater number of small footprint, single bedroom homes, maybe not tiny homes per se, but smaller to fit some of these situations like our homeless youth. And could we mix in some supportive service agencies to help support those homes and those populations? So that's some things I'm considering.
We have a couple of minutes left, so I think there's time for at least one more question. So if someone wants one, I think I see Ellis has a question, perhaps. Ellis, you're muted.
Incredible work, but I guess I wanted to bring up my concern about masking and vaccinations. Just came from my banks. There's no CDC guidance, and most small businesses, people don't have to wear masks, irregardless of their vaccination status. So I'm assuming these are very vulnerable populations that your staff is both vaccinated and masking.
We've had COVID measures throughout the pandemic. I've been reflecting what the city does. That seems like a good thing to do. And looking at what the health department does. So we did have masking for a long period of time. We had special vaccination clinics the health department held at both Paquin and Oak Towers. We have really good vaccination rates at the towers, which is good. I have collected a lot of input from both our staff and residents. We have relaxed our masking at the moment, but we'll monitor the situation and what's going on. But we'll continue to partner with the health department and bring in a booster clinic, hopefully, and keep pushing the good word out about vaccinations.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, Randy. On behalf of the Boone County Muleskinners, we've come to the end of this. I hate to bring the hammer down, but it is quarter after, and we're anticipating an executive committee meeting immediately following. But thank you for your wonderful presentation. I'm sure all the members here will join me in applauding your efforts.
Very good. Yeah. Well, if I may, just thank you to everybody for having me, and in particular, thank you, Councilperson Scala and Councilman Thomas, for all your support over the years and continued support. Always appreciated the work of both of you, and thanks for letting me be here.
Randy, please see the chat. There's a lot of comments and accolades for you in the chat.
All right, I'll check it
If you
out.
can access. Okay.
See y'all.